Hello and welcome to FPL Have a Beer, where I invite you to have a beer with me while I chat FPL. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the video to help me get more great guests on to this interview series. I'd really appreciate it. So welcome to another interview in the Meet the FPL slash Meet the Content Creator interview series, where I ask one of our lovely FPL content creators to join me, so I can ask them about their experiences of content creation, their thoughts on FPL and mental health, and towards the end we generally have a bit of a general chat about FPL and how the person's season's going. So for the 10th interview of this series, I can't believe I'm up to number 10 already. I am delighted to be joined by Tom from Who Got the Assists. Welcome to the channel, Tom, and delighted to have you on, mate. How are you?
Hey Gary, yeah, thanks for having me on. Congratulations on 10 interviews. It's really
Thank you, mate.
good progress in not very long. But yeah, obviously really enjoyed a couple of interviews, especially one with Joe, old
Yeah.
Uncle Joe as they call him.
Yeah.
Lovely guy I've known for many years. Had the pleasure of meeting him in Bristol a couple of years ago. It was quite
Nice.
surreal because I'd seen him on the Scoutcast for so many years before I started getting into this myself. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. It's brilliant, mate. So, oh yeah, another thing. You're the third Tom I've had on. So three Toms out of 10. I think we had FPL Tom and Tom from Golden Goal Fantasy Football. So you're my third Tom, a hat trick of Toms.
Bloody hell.
um, excuse me. So what usually how I open up, mate, is just to ask you a couple of general questions. So I was just wondering if you could, I'm sure some people know who you are, maybe some other people watching won't. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what football team do you support, what are your first memories of football, things like that.
So, I'm Tom. I'm from Essex, although my accent doesn't probably give that away anymore. I am an Arsenal fan, and I think probably my one of my earliest memories of football, World Cup '98, Dennis Bergkamp scoring that great goal against Argentina. I'm British, but I was born in the Netherlands because my father was working out there,
Okay.
and so I was watching that game, and my dad was watching that game. I said to him, "Oh, who does that really good player play for?" And he said he plays for Arsenal. I was like, right, okay, I'm supporting them from now on, and
I
that's
remember.
kind
Do you
of how
remember
it started.
that season? He scored this incredible one against Leicester, which was almost
Yeah, that's when he.
identical. It was almost identical, wasn't it? Where he sort of controls it on the inside, twists in, and then powers it
Do you
past the
mean
cover.
Newcastle? That's Newcastle.
No,
Took it past it.
that was much later. This was,
Philip Albert. Oh, okay. Was that when he got 1, 2, 3 in match of the day
I think so.
goal of the
It, it,
month?
it was in an FA Cup. It was
Yeah,
in an FA Cup
yeah.
match, and they drew like three
Okay.
all. It was really.
I mean, to be fair to myself, I was 9, so my memories are a little bit hazy.
Well, it was so
Not
it was so amazing because that was like the best goal I'd ever seen, and then he basically replicated it in the World Cup
Yeah.
match against Argentina. Anyway, sorry, mate.
God, what a master. But yeah, no. So that kind of got me into it. I guess I was never any good at football, unfortunately.
Me too.
And I come into football really from a gaming perspective. Like I love Football Manager or Championship
Mm.
Manager as it was back in the day. I've played it pretty much every version and sunk like God knows how many hours into it from the very beginning. Um, I think my record is something atrocious. Like I'm pretty sure there's one Football Manager from my uni days that the playtime was like kind of like 2,000 hours, but it was on all the time. Like
Bloody
it
hell.
didn't go away. And I think there's Foot Manager 2015 when I was pretty ill, which we'll talk about later on, where the playtime again was like 2,000 hours because it was like my solace, right? It's how I and then kind of the data and in terms of like the gameplay and picking players to purchase and your tactics and all of that. That's what really got me into football.
Can I be honest with you, Tom? I don't think this channel would have existed had they not have delayed the new version until next year. Because if the listeners don't know, they basically delayed
Football
football,
Manager.
yeah, from November until I think it's is it March or April next year, something like
It is,
that.
yeah, yeah. I just shoved the new like one of the updates on Steam onto my game, and I was just like, right, okay, we'll just do that.
With the new player roster, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. There's one you can get. I'll tell you about it afterwards. But there's one you can get in the workshop, which is basically just brings it up to date, brings it up
Cool.
to next season. So it's kind of all there anyway. But yeah. What else? What else do you want to know? Sorry.
Who do you support, Tom? Is it Arsenal?
I'm an Arsenal fan, as I said. Dennis Bergkamp and all
Arsenal
that.
fan. Okay, yeah, I've had a couple of Arsenal fans on lately. Favorite player?
Uh, I think for just kind of the first person, the first player I really kind of fell in love with was Dennis Bergkamp, and obviously Henri um, moved on to really enjoy Mesut Ozil. Maybe not the latter years, but just watching him play. I mean,
He was
never lost the
good.
ball,
Yeah, it's
never gave
gorgeous.
the ball away. Santi Cazorla, um, and then these days you're probably in the realm of it was Kevin De Bruyne for quite a long time.
Mm.
I'm not particularly, as I said, I kind of come at football in a slightly different way, so I'm not particularly tribal about oh yeah, well this player plays for Team X. I don't really like them, don't really care about that. Kevin De Bruyne, and then nowadays probably Martin Odegaard. And obviously back Bukayo Saka. um, um, happens to play for Arsenal, which is the team I support, but also both just like, fantastic players to watch and enjoy. And of course, Mo Salah from an FPL perspective, I think that he's like been during the time that I, as W, who got the assist, has been active. Um, Mo Salah's been the dominant force, and I think that I've had us because Liverpool as well have been such a massive part of the fantasy football experience for so long. I've got a bit of a
Mm.
soft spot for them as well. Wouldn't say obviously I don't support them or anything, but it's one of those where I just quite like watching them as a team, and even under Arne Slot, I think they've definitely transitioned very very nicely. So yeah, probably that kind of procession of players, I'd say.
It'll be interesting. Do you reckon Odegaard could get up to the level of De Bruyne?
Um, well, I think that to some extent they're slightly different players.
Mm.
So Odegaard, his main ability is to trigger the press. Um, and I think that he can do that much better than De Bruyne can. He's got the creativity, the underlying data for him is always great. Um, but I think that he plays, and that's the way with football now.
Mm.
It's all about systems a lot, and he's in a system which really suits him, whereas and De Bruyne was in a system that really suited him. Within the Arsenal system, there's no telling where Odegaard will go, provided everything kind of stays together. Um, will he ever kind of reach that kind of level of individual assisting brilliance that De Bruyne has? I don't know. I really hope he does, and I think he's got it within him. He's still very young, isn't he? Like relatively. Is it mid
Early mid
twenties?
20s, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know. It's one of those things, isn't it, where you used to see the footballers and they're all older than you, and you were like, ah, that's fine. And now it's like, I was 25. Wow, bloody hell. So coming into his prime over the next couple of years, like great touch, great vision. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see him develop that way. And he's very happy at Arsenal. And as long as we kind of keep our trajectory, I think, yeah, there's no reason why he and Saka, for example, can't be the standard bearers for us for years to come.
Yeah, I always remember like I would sort of track what players were near my age, and I think Ronaldo and Rooney were kind of the nearest, and Rooney's retired now, and Ronaldo's somehow still going, but makes me feel my age, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
So when did you get into fantasy football, Tom? And what are your like first memories of fantasy football?
So I got into fantasy football, and it's all on my account on FPL. I got into fantasy football at uni. I was rubbish. I didn't know what I was doing. Me and my flatmates just basically every week made loads of transfers just to try to beat each other on the week. We didn't take it seriously at all. Just every week we're just kind of making. I think it was 2009, 2010. So that'd be my second or third year of uni. Just taking minus fours, minus eights like it was no tomorrow, just buying in whoever it was and just captaining. So I think proper serious play doesn't start until 2013, 14 when I had my first job.
Mm.
Just absolute luck. So I wanted to kind of blend in with the guys and blend in the guys, the girls, everyone who was playing in the league. And
How many did you have in the league, Tom?
I think it was about 15, 20. So most people, so the office was about kind of 30 people. It was a small company.
Mm.
Obviously those people who didn't really, who just made a team at the start of the year and just forgot about it. But there are probably a core of about 4 or 5 people who I'm actually still in contact with today and still speak to them most days actually on my Slack. And I kind of made a team in that kind of the summer before the 2013-14 season. and I won that year. It was the
Nice.
year that Yaya Toure went wild, for example. So a bit of beginner's luck. I just kind of left the captain on Yaya Toure for the whole year, basically.
So we're going back what,
And
10 years? 10
yeah,
years?
2013, 14,
Yeah.
and started made a few kind of smartest transfers, and I just kind of started to I started to really enjoy it. Every weekend suddenly it wasn't so much about match of the day and watching the live football. It was also about what's going on in the Sunderland and Leicester game for some reason, and that kind of I guess piqued my curiosity about it, and I discovered the Scout, which was obviously the pioneer of the idea of an online community. Started posting on there, started chatting away on there, and I obviously discovered the members area too, and discovered stuff like we didn't have expected data back then. We had stuff like pen box touches, shots in the box, shots on target, but there are a few of these things which really helped me towards kind of certain players, I guess. So for example, I think my best season 2015-16, early doors, as in the preseason, I was looking at the last year's data and I thought, this Mares guy looks pretty good. So I started the season with him at 5.5, and
Oh, really?
yeah,
That,
the
yeah,
rest is
that,
history. Yeah.
the one with
So
him and Vardy, when it Vardy went on the 10, was it 10 or
yeah,
11 games?
Alvarez. No, the whole season, mate. The whole season they were
Wow.
absolute gold. So yeah. I suppose that kind of that's what kind of got me into it. Yeah, the work thing, and then I slowly kind of sucked a few of my friends into that sort of orbit. But yeah, it was all about the mini league for many years up until our first year, which was 2017-18 of doing content. So yeah, that's what kind of got me into FPL. Really, just an interest in football and just playing with my mates at uni, and then kind of just trying to be part of the gang at work, which definitely kind of then was the gateway drug into what it is now.
Okay, so you're going along. You're playing FPL in your work league. What sparks the thought? I know what I want to do. I want to create my own podcast slash FPL content.
So yeah, so I suppose we're getting into this now, and people who've listened to my pod. So I haven't had a YouTube show for in that long really.
So
It's been a podcast. It was a podcast really at the
yeah, because
beginning,
I've
right?
actually been uploading onto this videos going back about 4 years on YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, but they're just it's literally just a picture of the logo and then the
Oh, okay.
audio. That's all it was. There's no video. We couldn't work. I don't have it. Well, I'm not a Gen Z. I'm not particularly. It took me a while really to. I can get my head around it. But audio podcast is where I am. I'm not really a YouTube. I don't really watch that much YouTube
It's
because
take
I haven't got
it's
the time.
it's taken me until the 10th interview to realise the volume of the other person is too loud and to plug in headphones.
Yeah.
I'm on the same level as you.
No, as we spoke about pre, it
Yeah.
takes its time, Gary. But yeah, like I listen to podcasts all the time. That's me. That's my sort of generation. So it's taken me a long time to. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, so in New Year's Eve 2014, I went to a hospital in East London because I had not been sleeping. I had massive, had a few sort of lumps and bumps. I was really very itchy, and I was diagnosed with cancer. I had something called Hodgkin's lymphoma, which affects young men. David Brooks, who was at Bournemouth, don't know where he is now, was recently diagnosed with this. He's recently also recovered, bless him. But yeah, it affects young men around in their 20s, and I was one of the unlucky few. Luckily, the prognosis was quite good, but I then had kind of months of chemo and radiotherapy,
Sorry, Todd,
and
did they catch it relatively early then, or?
yeah, I was stage two, so it was relatively early. I still had kind of quite like I had a lump in my neck the size of probably an apple,
Oh.
and it was kind of all round, kind of, and I think in my kind of in my chest there were even bigger ones. So yeah,
Mm.
it was quite obviously quite a big shock, and during that period there were a couple of things I mentioned Football Manager already, but fantasy football was something as well that gave my life structure. because I was doing nothing. I was recovering from chemotherapy. I was kind of I was single at the time, so I wasn't exactly feeling sorry for myself or anything, because I was just kind of in full sort of focus mode. I'm going to fight
Yeah.
this. I'm going to do this. But outside of chemo and radiotherapy, I didn't really have much to focus on. I learned to cook, which is obviously good. But other than that, I just gamed. I couldn't drink. I couldn't smoke. So I just gamed. And part of that as well was on the weekends, because I knew that on Mondays and Tuesdays I'd have chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Part of the sort of the relief of that was looking forward to fantasy football.
At the
Right.
weekend,
So
yeah.
I didn't dread it because I was looking forward to it. Otherwise, I would have been thinking, oh, you know what, after this weekend. But instead, it became about, right, who am I captaining this week? What am I doing this week? That was the week. That was the year with the Mahrez and Vardy. That was the year that I had my best ever finish. And I guess when the dust had settled a little bit, I was listening to the Scoutcast, started listening to Always Cheating, and started kind of commenting a lot on the Scout. So I had all that free time. But I started to think, hey, you know what? I can actually do this. I'm not too bad at this whole talk, the whole talking malarkey. And back in those days, it seems scarcely believable now. Very few, if no, podcasts use stats at all. So we're really talking about back in the weeds. It was about 8 years ago. Stats were really barely used. People used to use, I'm not going to name any names, but there was lots of instinctive stuff. It was like, oh, he looked really good. All eye tests looked really good. I just loved the player, things like that. And me and my podcast partner, my first one, my childhood friend, Nick, we both kind of came at it from not being very good at football, but liking the data. I think Nick works in finance. I used to work in finance for many years. And it's just one of those things where we kind of thought, you know what, we could bring this sort of new slant to fantasy football. So we sat around, kind of thought, all right, what's a good podcast name? Well, what's the first question anyone ever asks if a goal scored if you're a fantasy football manager? Who got the assist? So that worked. And then
Sorry, Thomas.
what colour?
I was actually
Sorry.
when I was talking. I did an interview with Steve a few weeks ago. He was saying even in the newspapers, it was only relatively recently they actually started putting who got the assist even in there. I think it was really because of fantasy football they started including that sort of information.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's kind of why I came to fantasy football content creation, I guess. And yeah, it's been 8 years now. Been a very fun ride. But yeah, it's scarcely believable, really. If it was a child, my podcast would be what, in year 4? That's crazy, really.
Yeah. So you've been creating content for about 8 years now. So you're pretty old school, or is that the right word? You experienced at it. So just wondering if you could tell me like what your early experiences were like, and how maybe those have changed over the 8 years you've been doing it.
Yeah, the early experiences, as we kind of spoke about before we started with your sound stuff, there was a lot of fine tuning needed, a lot of sort of yeah. So we started kind of both in the same room every time, just recording straight into the computer. So there's a software called Audacity that we recorded straight into, and one mic. Having free beers at a WeWork in London, so they do free beers on every evening. There's a beer tap, so I used to get like 2 or 3 pints each. Get our like Tesco sandwiches and kind of just sit there and do the pod.
So you're in the pub.
No, in WeWork, so it's a workplace in London.
Okay.
They've got free beers, right?
Right.
So I booked out a meeting. I was working one of them at the time, so I booked out a meeting room like every kind of Monday night, and that's kind of how we started. And then kind of it took quite a long time before we moved into doing it virtually. But yeah, like doing that, and I remember being really, really like fucking fastidious about the editing. Like I edited everything. I edited
Wow.
any slight false start I get rid of, and I'd be up until 2, 3, 4 a.m. editing to make sure it was absolutely perfect. Like, and I think that kind of initially led to loads of it's a running joke as well with people who've listened to me for a long time, but lots of accusations that it was all scripted. Like I'd actually written out a whole script for me and Nick to say, because I edited it so like clinically. There were not that many pauses. It was all very kind of like boop, 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 boop. that it just kind of came out as being a little bit artificial. I suppose we
Yeah.
wanted it to be kind of professional from the beginning. And I know that Joe, God bless him, gave us a shout out for being one of the earliest pods, and it's definitely true. Like we just we wanted to kind of make an impact with that and make an impact with the data. And there was lots of stuff I used to do. Like I used to sit there, like most stats we used to write out, not a script, we used to like write out like copious notes every pod to make sure that everything we said was evidenced. Everything we said we reel off like evidence. You know, there'd be like a, oh, he's really good, he's a really good player because he's got 10 shots in the box. He's had 25 penny box touches against Southampton. He does this. And it used to be kind of really, really heavy. And that's kind of the early days, I suppose. And if, a lot of it was building that following on Twitter. So I'd be absolutely on it. But I'd be speaking.
It sounds like a lot of work that you're putting in then.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. I did a lot of work. I just absolutely killed it. Like I spoke to so many people on Twitter, like tried to build like relationships. I was writing in those days as well. So not just doing the pod, I wrote every week. Did like all sorts of articles and things like that. I think it's fair to say I'm a decent writer. So I'd be doing that as well. So I did that for the first couple of years just to kind of build a following. We had like a full on website and everything, like a bit like so yeah, all about FPL, something like that. So like some sort of one man band sort of thing. Nick and his wife got pregnant like pretty much the summer before we started. Who got this? So it was it was very much kind of it was going to be a 2 man thing, and the onus very much fell on me. But I loved it. I loved it. I love fantasy football. I still do. So I was very happy to do that. But yeah, juggling work and that and things like that. Yeah, after a while it takes its toll, doesn't it? So yeah, all of that kind of stopped. But yeah, the first few years, I guess, were marked by, in terms of the content, just kind of this frenzied sort of enthusiasm for it, and I was just doing everything really, and I really really enjoyed it. I loved like staying up until 2 3 a.m. and doing all the editing. I still look back on those days really fondly. Most people would absolutely hate to do that, but it gave me an excuse to drink late into the night, get stuff
And
done.
it's
I was young.
as long as you're enjoying it, that's all that really matters, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. And you said, um, because we messaged a bit beforehand, you said you've been through 7 different co-hosts. Is that right?
God. So it's like Henry VIII. So Nick left. So Nick was my first. Nick was the first co-host. He my friend from uni. So my friend from school. Sorry. He and I have been friends since we were 12. So we were very kind of like, yeah, we'll do this together. Then obviously Nick had a baby, and then he had another baby, and then it was just like, okay, this is too much to keep engaged with this. I went to Australia actually in 2019-20. So a friend from the FPL community who's not active anymore, a guy called FPL Stag, a lovely fellow called Anthony in Ireland, kind of came in for me while I was away for a few months traveling, and then we kind of kept him on. We were kind of a triad for a little while. When Nick dropped out, Anthony stayed on for a bit, which was lovely. And after a while, he was a bit younger. He was kind of he was kind of 19, 20 at uni, and then got his first job. And you know what it's like in your first job. Suddenly you're like, oh my god, you know, because he's quite a high powered lawyer now.
Well,
But he was just kind of like, oh wow, you know, I really need to put the hours in here. I can't really dedicate my brain over here anymore. So that kind of moved away. I had a little known fella. I can't remember what his name is now. After that, was it Harry or something? Have you heard of him?
oh, really?
Harry. Harry. I
Harry
don't know. I don't know who.
Daniels. Harry Daniels.
Oh yeah. Oh, that might be it. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
No, I've never heard of him. Never heard of him.
So I had him. I had him for half the season. He was a bit rubbish, to be honest. But yeah, I taught him everything I know. And he ignored all of that and became a massive success. But yeah, I had him for a while, who was just lovely. And then I had a lady called Lucy Hynett, who you may know, from which is Southampton, a bit of Southampton fan. Really lovely lady. Had her for a year, and then Southampton got relegated, and she kind of, I don't know whether it was me, but I think she kind of lost the love of fantasy football a little bit as well during that time. She'd been playing for longer than I had. She had a really good record, but she just kind of, I think she just kind of lost the love of it a little bit. And then Sam, who I'd met at FPL meets and always really enjoyed the company. He had some pretenses of, getting involved with fantasy football content. He's got his own channel now, which is really, really good. FPL Pricey on Blue Sky, Twitter, and on YouTube as well. Definitely worth checking out. Really, really good. Up and coming. He's at the FCAs. He's been at the FCAs as well at some point. But yeah. So it's
FCAs?
the Football Content Awards.
Ah, yes, yeah.
He attended that back in November.
So they have a specific fantasy football content part as part
So
of that,
Sam's up for that. Yeah, he's great. And
great.
Sam was kind of, I really like, as a guy, I love Sam, and also he had a lot of kind of YouTube and know-how and stuff like that I didn't have, because I was an audio guy. I feel like an old man, but that was it. Like, I can edit a really good audio piece, but ask me to set up a nice sort of a nice YouTube setup. If you look back a couple of years ago, even, like, it was just a Zoom interview, with the big PowerPoint and then us in this tiny little pictures, because I didn't know how to do like a StreamYard or something. I had loads going on in my life as well, with work and things. But I mean, that's kind of I went with Sam because he was a lovely person. Number one, no dickheads rule is very key, because I'm the dickhead, so you can't have two of them. And then that's a joke. And then and then I thought he'd just be a really good co-host in terms of like his style and just being a bit of a contrast to me. So yeah, it's been, what's that? 5?
5.
Is that 5? Yeah, it's 5. Yeah. So but yeah, I hope, touch wood, I hope Sam stays around. I don't get rid of it. He doesn't get bored of me anytime soon. But yeah, no, it's been an interesting journey. So it started out as being me and Nick WGCA being kind of both of our babies, and then Nick had natural baby, so it kind of became my baby, and it has been my baby for 8 years. But but now I've got an actual baby as well. So yeah, but yeah, it's still my 8-year-old, slightly yeah, much love, but at times slightly neglected child as well when life gets in the way.
So listeners who are fans of Tom, please forgive me, but I'd not actually listened to the podcast before until this week. I really loved it, particularly the intro music. That was I really like that, and I highly recommend you people subscribe. What would you say are the positives of being a content creator in the FPL space?
For me, I think it's so. And I think we'll probably come back around to this later, but for me, it's a hobby, right? It's always been a hobby. It's always been something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoy podcasting, like broadcasting about this particular one thing that I really love, that I'm a bit of a nerd about, that occupies way too much of my brain space, Gary.
Yeah.
This is like something that I've always really enjoyed. And that's number one for me, is like enjoyment for me. I really like it, which sounds really selfish. I'm sure there's loads of people who will pontificate about like doing something for other people. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously I hope that I assist other people, intentional, but I also kind of, I really enjoy doing the pod. I really enjoy kind of nerding out about FPL, thinking about things on, I guess slightly like more macro meta level, the creativity which comes when Sam and I discussing what we're going to do this week, we're going to talk about, because we don't just do, just sounds like I'm being pejorative, I'm not, but we don't kind of just look at what happened this week, let's go through the games. We talk about one particular subject every week and come up with something like that. We do like a game week preview and stuff, but there's always one thing that we talk about which is more sort of potentially more step back. Sometimes obviously there's stuff like who's the best kind of midfielder around kind of 7.5 and below, but sometimes it is stuff like how do you deal with how do you deal with regret, what about what are the behavioral science parts of FPL that may be worth flagging,
Awesome.
How do we look at kind of in profiles of behavior, and how do we kind of deal with taking hits, what's your risk sort of appetite like, and how does that impact how you play, all sorts of other stuff that we do, levels of engagement with FPL and how that affects your kind of planning. So yeah, the creativity that comes with that I really like, and I suppose just the feeling of like feeling like I'm kind of part of something a little bit. I know that sounds a bit wanky, but part of something, and I'm kind of like able to talk about it, and I suppose it goes back to my main point, but just enjoy being part of FPL a bit more. Like I feel like now I do this, or now I do kind of some semblance of kind of content creation, even though my level is much lower than um, some others. Um, I feel like if I didn't do the pod and game weeks went by and I didn't kind of have the chance to talk about it, I feel like something was missing
Mm.
now.
Mm.
If you see what I mean. I don't know, I just love talking about this game. And it's a very flipping simple game, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
as Joe always says, you're just moving shirts around on a page. But it's just so the beauty in that simplicity, and then the kind of the glorious possibilities that could happen every week. I don't gamble, but this is it's basically gambling, isn't it? That's why it kind of probably perniciously takes so much of my brain space. But
Yeah.
yeah, just feeling of being part of it, enjoying talking about it, and enjoying talking about it with a mate as well. I mean, that's quite cool too. So yeah, all of these things, I guess, are why I do it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There's probably a semblance of habit about it now as well. Plus, I mean, it's relevant for this channel. It's an opportunity for me to have a beer on Monday night. So, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
who's going to say no to that?
It's almost sounds like the stuff you'd be doing even if you weren't on a podcast. You'd be thinking about and chatting about FPL anyway. So why not record it and let other people hear your thoughts? Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I think this the initially when we started, it was very much kind of like, we were having all these sort of really in-depth chats down the pub, and we were like surely this could someone I'm sure someone out there would think this
Someone
is
must
worth
listen
listening
to it.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the opposite question then, Tom. What about the negatives?
So I think for the first kind of few years, it was very much about playing to the gallery a little bit, because you felt like if you'd said something on the pod on the Monday, that you worried that if you didn't do what you said on the Friday, people would think that you're a liar. People think about, all the negative things that have only proliferated over in recent years.
Like your
And that
trans,
kind of,
if you say your transfer on a Monday,
yeah, that's it.
yeah.
Or you kind of really push a player on Monday.
Mm.
On Friday, it may not be as viable. You may have kind of thought, oh, actually, maybe there's something better for me to do. But I found myself always kind of going with what I'd said, just because I was too worried about what people would think of me if I'd told them one thing and done something else, right? But FPL can change so quickly, and it took me many years to recognize that. Other negatives, like the environment on X, I think became a bit kind of toxic after a while. That became I kind of just stopped posting much apart from the pods after it, probably about 2022. Like, just it didn't seem worth it. Like, I think you definitely saw like an infiltration of football Twitter style commenting
And,
on X. I didn't like it. Like, it was very like, it wasn't like people being friendly. It used to be kind of, I see why you're saying that. However, here's what I think. It was very much like, you're an idiot.
yeah.
And that kind of, for me, that kind of makes me think, all right, just mute. I'm done with you. I don't want to talk to you.
Just a bit of a
And
side question, Tom. I
yeah,
hope these videos can be something that people can come back to listen to rather than being time compressed. But at the minute, we're in late 2004. There's kind of a mass exodus from Twitter to somewhere called
24.
Blue Sky. Yeah, 2020. Did I say 2004?
Yeah. Looking back to those glory days,
I
Gary.
have a tendency to do that. Do you reckon the environment in Blue Sky will be any better, or do you reckon it will kind of?
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I think that like the X algorithm, however it was, definitely rewarded a certain style of like content creation can be your pod, right? That's how I always looked at it. But your content can also be your Twitter persona and tweeting all day long and all that sort of
I
thing.
didn't realise
And
until recently that people get paid for making tweets. So I didn't realise that
oh,
was a thing.
absolutely. Engagement farming. I
Wow.
never did any of that. Not even from the early days. I wasn't interested. I just didn't do any of the stuff that I'd see as being quite vanilla. That was never for me. I was never interested in doing like who's your captain this week, and then never answering any of those questions, never answering any of the comments. Like, those things are kind of classic engagement farming um things that you do, but I never wanted to do that because I always
So
thought
Tom,
that was a bit sort of
what's
basic.
engagement farming? Just getting people to reply.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just and then on Twitter, what especially on the Musk, the algorithm did was it rewarded division and rewarded sort of being kind of quite straightforward, and it
Mm.
rewarded kind of lots of. But he didn't really reward conversation. It rewarded sort of like saying something like, "Oh, blah blah captioners are all idiots, because it's best to go with blah blah," or people who have wildcarded them this week have all messed up, and lol at them. Um, it's fine. I can understand why people do it, or did it, but at the same time, that was never something that I kind of was comfortable ever kind of getting involved with, right?
Mm.
So, yes, I think that kind of the negativity surrounding that was not for me. Um, and I don't know. I think for me as well, one of the negatives as well was that I do like to switch off from fantasy football as well. Like, I've got an actual life outside of this, and if you really do want to kind of uh, grow big, sometimes you do have to, I suppose, make the decision that I'm going to go pro, or I'm going to devote massive hours of my life to doing that. I simply don't want to, and I think that that's kind of maybe reflected in kind of some of the questions that you're going to ask me later. But
Mm.
it kind of also means that you can your lane is very well defined depending on where you are. So yeah, main negatives probably thinking about your audience and the decisions that you're making rather than what's best for your team. Something that I've kind of gotten over now. I think as long as on the next pod I just say, look, I did this and this is why, people tend to kind of understand. I'm not exactly out to fleece them, am I? I'm not charging them for my advice or my um all my content. Um,
Sorry, Tom. Do
the,
you
the,
do you do you do a Patreon or anything like that?
no, no,
No.
I never have.
Or
Uh,
channel join is completely for free, sort of. Well, obviously it's a free, but there's no financial
no,
incentive.
I've got some ads on the pod, but why not? Basically, I don't do the middle ones either because because it annoys me. So if I'm running, and again, no slighting on people who do, I understand why you do, etc., etc. But I don't put middle ones on either because if I'm running, I stick to pods that I know don't have middle ones because then I don't want to have the,
Are these the
um,
adverts that cut in?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have them on because I think it's better for the listener.
Can I tell you
Which,
something? Can I tell you something incredible, Tom? Right, this is I know exactly what you mean, and they really piss me off. Since I've started using a Google app instead of Safari or whatever it's called on my iPhone, I have not had a single advert when I'm listening to YouTube on my mobile for a year. It's bizarre. I've got no idea why. Um,
wow,
I don't know if it's because I've actually got one of those ad blockers on my profile
maybe.
on YouTube, and maybe it's. But anyway, I'm going to shut up in case Google somehow decode this with AI and figure things out.
Yeah.
So this is one. So we talked a little bit about this on in a messaging beforehand. So as you said, you've been running for 8 years. So not perhaps the very first content creators, but you're quite early in the podcast scene. Um, and I was wondering, you're down at, I hope you don't mind me saying this, a relatively low number of subscribers compared to people like who started at a similar time than you, such as Planet FPL, I think, are on about 15,000.
Yeah.
Does that piss you off? And why maybe do you think you don't have more subscribers? Because certainly, having listened to the podcast, I don't think it can be to do with the content.
So I think there's a couple of reasons. One, it's not my life. It's not something that I made a decision really early on that I wasn't interested in making it kind of my job. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that definitely impacted a lot of things. So one thing that I've picked up on in the conversation here is that I'm talking about a podcast and you're talking about basically a YouTube show,
Okay.
and that was not on my horizon at all. Like I never really had any interest in going onto YouTube
No.
until it kind of became a bit silly not to,
Mm.
effectively. And it's only been the last couple of years that I've actually, that well, thanks to Sam, hugely, the pod that is actually fully fledged and good on YouTube. I think we do a great show, but we never really picked up on YouTube because I never really did it. It was all kind of audio first, and I think the subscription numbers on audio are good. It's just the
Oh,
YouTube
okay.
side of it
Okay.
has never been something that I've really cared about, looked at, tried to foster. So I think that's kind of one part of it. Uh, I do think as well that because I've always been like, this is my hobby. I've got a job. I don't want another one.
Mm.
Effectively, I've got a job that I kind of like. I don't want another one. And that's kind of held me back a little bit as well in terms of you know stuff like a few years ago, perhaps I should have maybe kind of looked into tool myself up on you because I'm capable. I'm probably just a bit lazy. I could have probably kind of tooled up on YouTube and got something a bit sooner, but I just kind of was just like, well, I already allocate a fair few hours to this. I don't want to go kind of any further, which is my choice because as I said, I've got a life and I've got a job. Now I've got a lovely daughter, and there's only so much there's only so much you can do within those parameters, right?
Mm.
Um, I think as well we never I built everything. I think it's fair to say I built everything from scratch. So I've never had the backing of a scout or I had a little bit of backing from the hub, but I've never really kind of had that sort of full blown kind of celebrity sort of or kind of big powerhouse behind me. I've just
Have
done it all
they
myself, and
have they ever offered?
no, I don't know. It's one of those things that I've never really. I don't maybe do myself the service. I'm not particularly the best at marketing myself. Like
Mm.
all of that sort of, hey, look at me, how good I am, sort of stuff has never really been my bag. I'm not very good at kind of the shameless self promotion. I call it shameless. I know that people do need to do it. I understand that, but I'm maybe hyper self aware, and I just don't like doing it. If that makes sense, it makes me feel very uncomfortable. Like I could never work in a sales role, for example. Um, and I suppose as well, the proof is in the pudding. If you look at my record, like the first 4 or 5 years of the Who Got This, I was fucking dreadful, just because
Really?
like yeah, really bad, like 6-figure ranks.
Oh,
And
it's
what
an
happened?
FPL rank player type.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
bad. And again, the proof of the pudding is in the eating a lot of the time. And I don't. It's not as if I don't advise people to do anything because I like, and the whole ethos of the pod was always like, right, we're going to give you the information. It's up to you to describe. It's up to you to work out what to do with it. Which is a lot of the time not what people want. People want to know who to pick.
Mm.
But I don't want to do that, which again probably is a bit of a drawback to kind of hit in the mass market in inverted commas. Um, but like for me, when I first started, man, I was just in my little kind of, I was in my little mini league. That's all I ever did. That's why I was quite good because I was able to see right within these 20 people, the paid lim mini league I really cared about. What could I do to beat them every week? Well, what are they possibly going to do?
It's a very
Going
It's a
from
very different thing than playing for overall rank, isn't it?
That's it. Going for I didn't know what overall rank was, Gary. I had no
Mm.
idea. Like I saw people going, "Oh, a top 1% rank every 5 years." I don't know what the fuck that is. And then I think there was a big sort of adjustment period. And as I said, I was playing to the gallery. Um, Making sort of road transfers, making road captaincies, like doubling down on things. Like if I sold Salah in the first season quite early on. Didn't buy him back because I was like, I don't want to go back. But making all these sort of stupid mistakes, and it took me quite a long time to kind of get my head back around to kind of just playing in a particularly decent way. Um, so yeah, I think probably a combination of those things kind of had an impact. It's
Do,
not like
does it piss
you
you
can't.
off
What?
uh, that you maybe haven't got quite the numbers?
No, not really. As I
Mm.
said, it's kind of. I think the numbers are reflective of the effort that I put in, or the time. Not the effort I put in, 'cause I put a lot of effort in, but the time that I put in.
Mm.
So I've got absolutely no. I've got nothing against people who are doing well on those things because they put in a hell of a lot of effort. I listen to Planet FPL. I listen to probably 4 or 5 podcasts a week that James puts out. I love that guy.
They're
Um,
full time, aren't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm not, and I'm not. I have no interest in being, and I have no interest in making this my career.
Mm.
So with within that sort of within the confines of that, within the lane that I'm in, I'm fairly okay with it. Do I want? Do I wish that we had more listening subscribers? Absolutely. Who wouldn't? So
Yeah, of
why
course.
wouldn't you be? Why would you be here? But like a lot of the stuff, like the relentless marketing, as I mentioned earlier on, and a lot of kind of what comes with that. I'm just not particularly comfortable with. I'm not particularly good at. My idea was always, oh, the quality of the content was under its own. In a saturated market, that becomes harder. And then if you add in an algorithm which throttles you at the expense of anything that you put out being absolutely nuked effectively, it's harder and harder to get yourself noticed, especially on X, which was kind of the main sort of way that people found us, right? So yeah, I mean, I can kind of, I'm pretty serene about it. To be honest, it doesn't bother me because I think if I was going to be younger and more sort of frosting and didn't really have the context of the life lessons that having cancer speech teaches you, didn't have life lessons of other things that I've encountered in my life, then maybe I'd be more worried about this. But at the end of the day, it's just fantasy football. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't bother me that much. I just get on with it, and I enjoy doing the pod, as I said earlier on, and that's enough for me. If people want to listen, that's absolutely fantastic, and I really wish that more did. But how to if am I going to go out and aggressively market the pod? Probably not, just because I just don't feel comfortable doing that, even though I probably should. Maybe I need a hype man, Gary. Do you know anyone?
You need a promoter slash manager. Nick, one thing that just jumped in my head, it's not on my list of questions. In the, well, it won't be the last podcast if you're listening to this, but a couple of interviews ago, I interviewed Trigger Lips. Do you know him, Nick? And one of the kind of bugbears he has with fantasy football is gambling advertisement. And I looked at I can't remember if it was on your Blue Sky or your Twitter, where you basically
Both.
have no gambling, don't approach me with offers of advertising gambling. I just thought if maybe you could comment on that.
Absolutely. So I despise the gambling industry. I used to work for on the sports desk of a well-known sports industry, a sports agency, and part of the remit was gambling, and I refused to work on it.
Mm.
But everyone else on my team did. So I obviously heard about it, saw the data. It's repugnant what these people do.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
prey on the poorest people in society, segment them into disposable income by basically looking at how much of someone's benefits effectively they can take away, or how they can lure people into spending more. You know, creating horrific sort of games with FOBT machines, for example. Like I don't have a problem if you're kind of saying, okay, and this is the fault. This is always the but people are adults. People have a right to exercise free will. I completely understand that. I'm not saying that. I'm not advocating a nanny state. But what I am saying is that this is a horribly addictive industry full of kind of strategies which are designed to entrap people, especially those in the lower echelons of society who can't afford to do this,
And
to
also,
gamble.
a lot of kids play FPL as well, don't they?
Yeah. But I
Yeah,
mean, FPL is methadone a lot of the time, right? It's kind of, you get the thrill, and I don't mind that. I think FPL it should be harmless, and I think a lot of the time it kind of is. There's a lot of kind of, we'll talk about this in a little bit. Like, there's a lot of kind of mental health aspects of FPL which can affect people, but at the end of the day, you're not wasting money on it, are you? And it's not enticing you to spend money. The Premier League, especially if you watch Premier League on Sky, wow. I mean, that's just again repugnant. Like, it's whistle to whistle advertising for gambling.
yeah,
Bet
yeah.
365 comes in just before the game kicks off. Like, it's disgusting. But at the end of the day, businesses have every right in this capitalist system to make money however they see fit. So, I mean, the Scout take money from gambling companies. Fair play. I mean, that's their remit. I don't agree with it. So within my little bit of FPL, my decision is I'm not interested in gambling companies. Like, we've had all sorts. We've had people asking us to get on board with all sorts of things. We got invited to fucking Ascot one year by Betway. You know,
Really?
like it's just it is incredible, really, what people do. And there's lots of other things out there. I'm not going to name any because I think that may kind of get people in trouble. But there are loads of different sort of offshoots of gambling as well out there, that lots of prominent people are kind of involved with peddling, and it's all part of the same horrific little bubble, which is designed to entrap people who can't afford to spend money on things which they shouldn't be spending money on. It's horribly addictive. It's a horrible thing which absolutely ruins lives, and it's a horrible industry which is bent on ruining lives. And I can't ever morally be part of that. So that's kind of where I am on that one.
Yeah, no,
Don't think there's much room for for questions, but
yeah. No, I loved the one thing I did love is I know you said you haven't listened to the Trigger Lips podcast, but I used the exact metaphor of gambling is heroin and FPL is methadone. So the fact that you kind of mentioned methadone without prompting, I was maybe we have similar metaphorical styles. I'm not sure.
yeah, maybe.
Um,
I do, yeah.
yeah. So one thing, another thing I thought might be have been interesting to ask you is obviously you started 8 years ago when the YouTube content creation space was quite open. Now it's obviously very condensed. You know, so much content out there. I was wondering what advice would you give to any young, or not even young, but people wanting to create a YouTube channel now? What advice would you give to them?
Oh, don't talk to me. I've got no idea what I'm talking about. Go and speak to Harry. Go and speak to Oscar. Go and speak to Sam. Don't speak to me. I've got no idea what I'm talking about. Um, yeah, I wouldn't know where to start with that one. Again, the difference here is that I'm talking about a podcast. I still think about a podcast in my head. I know it's like a show,
Or
I
or,
suppose,
or,
in
or
lots of
starting
ways.
or starting a podcast.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very saturated market, and what is really important, and maybe this will apply to you, to be honest. I do have some knowledge about. I do kind of work wise have knowledge about marketing and things like this. And what's really important is finding a USP. What makes you different? Even if you're going to have to use the same on YouTube, the same designs, the same sort of little faces of yourself going, and like you're still gonna have to do that, right? And you're still gonna have to like have those sort of snappy titles that get people involved. But there's gonna be something about your pod or something about your show, I should say, which is unique to you. There's got to be something about it which draws people in and keeps them interested throughout the course of the season, or if they watch that one show, will hook them in, and is really simple, easy to pass PARSE, so understand immediately, and is really kind of habit forming that people kind of think, here's the thing, I really want to see what has happened next week with this particular thing, or this is a really unique way of looking at information that I haven't seen before. So a good friend of mine, FPL Fran, um, he has this thing called the cheat sheet, which is a brilliantly simple way of looking at every single player, every single position, at different price points. He'll run through that and tell you, at each price point exactly which player kind of is coming to the fore for him within this. And if you're kind of in the audience, of a segment of the audience who are just looking for, right, I need to find out this week, I need to sell this player. Who am I looking for? You've seen Fran one week, and you know, all right, I'll go and see that guy again. Oh, this is really useful. And then suddenly, that's how I get subscribed, and then I'm served that whenever Fran uploads a video, I'm there. So finding, doing a bit of market research, looking through what else is out there, what they do, what they don't do, and what they don't do, where's the opportunity for you?
Mm.
That's what's really important. That's what's where you need to be looking at it. SWOT is also quite good. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So what are you strong at? What might you lack? So in my case, I lack a late riser style brilliant history. Um, what's the opportunity for me? Well, I'm quite good at analyzing data. I'm good at visualizing data. But late riser is a great speaker as well. But I'm also quite a good speaker. What are the threats? Well, probably other people can do that as well. So what can I do differently? How can I present it differently? What kind of twist can I put on it? What angle can I use and come up with, which maybe would mark me out as different from the rest and potentially kind of get people interested in continuing to watch my channel. I guess that'll work from a YouTube perspective and a pod perspective. I probably would, if you're young now, you're not going to listen to podcasts anymore. That's for old people like me walking their child around the park. That young people like yourself, Gary, are there watching YouTube day in day out. Yeah, I think it's different. It's a different kettle of fish, but I'm pretty sure that would correspond across both mediums of content, as it were.
I think about it as podcasts because I do listen to a lot of podcasts, but I listen to all of them on YouTube. Um,
Mm,
so that's probably where I connect
fair
the
play.
two.
Yeah, no, fair play, fair play.
I'm gonna guess. I think we've already covered. So there's two sort of like more light-hearted questions I usually ask again. I think we've already sort of covered how you came up with the channel name, haven't we? This one, I'm guessing because you have been podcast format for so long, might be a no. But have you ever been recognised out on the street, Tom, as an FPL creator?
Um, I'm not nowhere near a raptor. He seems to get recognised everywhere he goes.
It's got the big shiny bald head that helps.
Yeah, the chin strap, beard also.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes, I was recognised in a taxi once, which is quite
Oh,
weird. The
really?
taxi driver who was youngish, as an Uber, said, "Oh, your voice sounds really familiar." I was just like, "Oh, yeah, I run a." He was like, Do you do that? Who got me assist?" I was like, "Yeah, that's me." He was like, "Oh my god, yeah, I listen to you." But yeah, no, it's very few and far between. Because I am Asian, I do feel like some people probably don't want to. Um, I think FPL meets people have kind of. I've seen this a few times. People can be like, "Are you Tom?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm." It's like, "Oh yeah, no, okay, yeah, you are." And I think there's definitely always a bit more of a kind of a bit of a shyness, just in case I've got the wrong person.
Okay.
Effectively, sometimes.
Okay.
But yeah, that's my. I haven't got lots of really big sort of stories about that one,
It's
unfortunately.
interesting the person recognised you for your voice though. I guess that really
Well,
maps
it's
into the fact you're mainly a podcast.
Well, that's it. It's back in the day. It's back in the day, Gary. It's all back in the day. It's all very much like I definitely had a few. Uh, I had a couple of. I had an email from a friend of mine, now a friend of mine who lives in Hong Kong, saying that he'd kind of heard me talking to my sister when we were in Hong Kong at one time. It's like, "Oh, are you in Hong Kong?" I was like, "How the fuck do you know that?" It's like, "Yeah, I heard. I'm sure I heard your voice in Mongkok Station." I was like, "What?" And then we kind of met up, and yeah, really sound guy. We're still friends to this day. But like, very few and far between. But it was always kind of, back in 2000 and 2017, 18, 19, like that, when Andy first started. Andy was the first sort of proper FPL YouTuber. I think I was the first guest on his channel, as I told you,
Yeah,
many,
yeah.
many years ago. But he was the first proper FPL YouTuber. But before then, there was nothing.
He,
Really,
he very very
pure
rarely.
YouTube.
It must be quite. I mean, he very 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 rarely has guests on even now, doesn't he?
Yeah, but I think that was kind of when he was just kind of setting it out, wasn't he? Like, that's very, very early days. But yeah, so yeah, I think kind of the visual side of FBL is only now, well, not only now, but has come into being, I
Hmm.
suppose, over the last sort of 5 years, big in a big way, and I've been very slow to that, effectively. And plus, who wants, apart from my poor long suffering partner, who wants to look at my face, really? So, yeah.
I think you've got a lovely face, Tom.
Oh, thank you,
Um,
mate. That's very kind of you.
okay, so if we'll move on now from content creation to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about FPL and mental health. So I always mention this just in case no one else has watched any of my videos. I'm a psychologist who's done research with FPL Raptor and other academic colleagues on FPL and mental health. There's a few videos on the channel where I discuss that if anyone's interested. Um, so I'll start off by asking Tom, maybe forgetting about the content creation mental health link for a moment, has FPL, I'll ask you about that in a second, has
Yeah.
FPL ever, just as a player, affected your mental health? And when I'm talking about mood and mental health here, sort of as in one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think in the early days, especially, it affects me a lot more. I think it's fair to say I'm quite a resilient person, given my past history. But
Mm-hmm.
still, I think you can open yourself to a lot of negative thoughts, because at the end of the day, your decisions are basically the consequence of are basically evidenced by your rank or your game week outcome, right?
Mm.
Um, so over time, I've developed kind of a bit of a thick skin about it. Like, I'll be annoyed for about back in the day, I was annoyed for it could easily ruin my weekend in some ways. Like, I'm not saying that I'd be because I think it's it does disservice to people. Honestly, Gary, to say I was depressed about FPL, I never use that word because I know that I, I've got, sadly, not me, but people close to me have personal experience with depression and other sorts of mental health conditions. So,
I think it's
um,
more.
I
Sorry, Tom. It's more. I think for most people, it's more of a feeling of frustration. Would that be true of
yeah,
you?
yeah, that's it. That's it. Like, it's never gonna. It's like, I think it would ruin my weekend in some ways.
Mm.
I'd be really kind of pissed off, and it would kind of change the mood in the house. They were talking about kind of five, like 7, 8 years ago, and over time, I kind of started to kind of develop coping mechanisms about it and detach myself a little bit from FPL. Um, in terms of the emotional side of it, so just kind of seeing it as a game and kind of, I think everybody has it's like the stage of grief, isn't it?
Mm.
Everyone has kind of that kind of, I guess, reaction to something going badly. You got your denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Yeah.
And I go very, very, I don't even bother with denial anymore. I go straight to anger, and then bargaining, like, oh, you know what, like, maybe next week the player I've bought in will do all right. Depression, yeah, that can last for a little bit. But I mean, way I look at it, you go from being angry to laughing about it. Those are the two sort of poles that I've got. And nowadays, I go from being angry to laughing about it in literally seconds. It doesn't affect me too much. So, you know, I've sold so many players who have gone on to bang, and bought players who have gone on to do nothing. And yeah, I mean, back in the day, that really did piss me off. But I've always kind of had the I guess the recognition through, obviously, the horrible personal experience that I've had with my health, that there's more to life than these little things. And I'm kind of,
Mm.
Jurgen Klopp during lockdown said that, football is like the most important, the least important things.
Mm.
And I think that I kind of see that, and see FPL as that in my life. If that makes sense. So it's the most important, the least important things that I'm involved with. Um, and I suppose being able to sort of compartmentalize is what's really important to me, and but that's taken time to get there, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, especially, kind of as things have kind of changed at home, like, life became a lot easier just to kind of just see it that way. So um yeah, I mean, I have in the past been affected by FPL, but only within a time frame, right? It's not been a enduring, sustained thing that's got me down.
Mm. Um. So I'm going to ask you about more from the mental health perspective as a content creator. And I know you mentioned that something you might want to talk about here is that you've suffered some racial abuse as part of making FPL content. So I wondered if you want to talk about that a bit here as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was back. It was a little while ago. It actually happens. Least it actually didn't happen. It hasn't happened as much in recent years, which is really good. I think if I was more visible on X, it would have happened a lot more. Which, again, because I saw that it was going that way, um, it was part of kind of pulling back. Like, so for those who don't know, I'm half Chinese, and it's when I was growing up, it was quite bad. I grew up in a very sort of English area, and it wasn't the nicest situation in my primary school. For example, I did get bullied a little bit. um I'm not hoping for any sympathy. I'm just telling you like it is.
Mm.
And but kind of past that point, it never really, it I just never really I kind of forgot that I looked different, right? And then I've never really had anything. And then I think again, this account is still going, and it's probably still being run by the same person. But I posted, when Always Cheating came over one time, I posted a picture of all of us together, and the guy basically.
Those are the American guys, aren't they?
Yes,
Yeah.
and the guy was just like, "Huh, you know, this guy, part Ji Sung, this guy," and yeah, I was just like, oh, "Fuck's sake," and yeah, I mean that became a bit of a thing. I've had a few sort of comments like even the little ones like. Oh, I can't believe Tom looks like that. He's it's not who I'd have thought he would look like, and um, yeah, a few other bits and pieces which I'm not going to repeat, but it can happen sometimes, and it's not nice because it just like even down to the odd unguarded comment. Like, okay, I'm in a hidden minority. Do you know what that is, Gary? So,
Maybe remind
so,
me.
so there are some minorities that I guess like in ethnicity or multicultural studies who kind of integrate perhaps better.
Yes.
So like Hindu Indians and Chinese do tend to kind of integrate in some ways in a less visible way, I suppose, than others.
Yeah. I get
Good
what
at
you mean.
assimilating, etc., etc. And also, I'm mixed race, so it's even more the case. Although that brings its own.
I have to be.
Um, com-
I have to be honest. I wouldn't have even realised you are Chinese unless you said it. If that makes sense. From looking at you.
really?
Yeah, from looking at you on the screen. Maybe that's because I'm so it's so not in my mind, but possibly I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
I don't know.
I think it definitely kind of has become a lot more of a thing in recent years, sadly, as well, with recognizing difference. But yeah, I mean, that was a really kind of sobering experience early on in the content journey
Sorry, Tom.
that could happen.
There was that player. There was that player who's just got banned from saying about Son.
Bentinker,
Yeah.
yes.
What did he say? They all look the same. Basically, it was along
Yeah, they all
those
look the
lines. You
same.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
God. Um,
it seems to
I
all.
mean,
I'm guessing in. I don't know where Pentecost from, but it seems like
Uruguay.
maybe that's sort of an acceptable form of racism there. I don't know.
Yeah, remember the Spain national team all doing that as well many years ago.
Well, though.
Yeah, doing the eye thing.
Oh right, okay.
Look, I mean, it doesn't affect my life in many material ways.
No.
I said like the hidden minority thing. If I was black or if I was a Muslim or something like that, there are certainly a lot more institutional and societal um, prejudices which do undoubtedly exist.
Mm.
Um, but you know, it's never nice to be kind of demarcated as different within your peers, and that definitely affected me early on. And then maybe as well, that may have had a bit of a residual impact on me wanting to put my face onto social media.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
whether rightly or wrongly, you know, I've always been kind of more flippant about the idea of like if it's kind of it's very much kind of oh it's their problem not mine sort of thing. That's always kind of what's been in my mind.
Mm.
It's just that I can't help but have an emotional response if I see or hear something like that, you know.
Mm.
You know, I've had something like that recently where someone said, "Oh, made a kind of a tangentially racial comment about me," and I've just been it kind of definitely still affects me emotionally, even though I've kind of played it down without going into specifics, um, and sometimes that can make you a little bit sort of like I don't really want to put myself in a situation where that gets exposed or something like that. So, no, I'm obviously not ashamed. I am who I am, but no, I'm too long in the tooth to care about what other people think of me in that regard. But still, I think that was obviously something that I had to go through very early on. It won't happen anymore, hopefully, and it's not going to bother me that much anymore if it does happen. But yeah, early doors, I think that definitely did kind of shape my FPL experience a little bit. Where I was kind of like, oh no, like, I'm here to talk about fantasy football. I'm not here to debate, you know, whether you saying something like that is racist or not. It clearly is. I'm not even going to you being a white person, me being a non-white person. I think that probably my lived experience is very different from yours. I'm not going to debate whether this is racist or not.
I,
It
wo-
clearly is.
I wonder if they just a lot of people just say it to try and stir people up. You know, I imagine that's often their motivation rather than anything else. So if you react to it, you're
Yeah,
just giving them what they want, really, aren't you?
Yeah, it's Twitter trolling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly the same. So don't give any. If you give them oxygen in the platform, that's literally what they're looking for. So don't do that. But yeah, I mean that was. I mean, you asked me earlier on what's kind of been the worst points of being content, what's been kind of the negatives of being content creator. This hasn't happened loads. I'm going to say that it's always been kind of the odd 1-2 comments. I went on the Scoutcast once. Um, there were definitely a couple of comments on there that I screenshotted and sent to Joe, and God bless him, he kind of removed them from the Twitter the chat immediately. Um, so a couple of comments here and there on Twitter, but other than that, it's been fine. But it's one of those things that you do, especially if you are not white, you do kind of have a bit more of an eye on and an eye out for, and it has been one of those things that does give me reticence about doing any more. But then, there's thankfully there's definitely a lot of diversity in the FPL community, which is brilliant. And
Yeah.
long may that continue.
Um, beyond that, is there any other? I think you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on in terms of feeling pressure to make particular moves. Is there any other part of being a content creator in specifically that has an effect on your mental health or mood?
Um, not, I mean, not really. As I said, because I'm not, because maybe it's me putting a box around or compartmentalizing where I am, what I'm doing with fantasy football. That kind of enables me to dismiss or uh, puncture any feelings surrounding, I wish that I was getting more followers or getting more listeners or something like that.
Mm.
Because I mean, of course crossed my mind. I'm human, but at the end of the day, I'm experienced enough, smart enough, however you want to put it, to just remind myself of why I do with it, what I do in the context of why I do them. So it doesn't. Not many things annoy me that much. The only thing that does annoy me is that FPL is very, very well. It swings heavily, doesn't it?
There's a lot of
And
there's a lot of variance involved, as people say.
indeed, and me not getting the luck of the green. That's the only thing. You obviously want to have a good record. You obviously want to do well every season, and I think that can definitely be a big pressure point for a lot of content creators. That if you're not doing very well, and I had that for 5 years, so I'm at the other side of it now, where I've kind of just made peace with it and just hope people do part with it, frankly. And if I don't, then fair play. It's just not for me to. I can't do anything about that. But I think there's definitely perhaps some pressure, especially towards the end of the season. If you're not doing particularly well and you're running a show, then maybe that could impact how you kind of play, and it could impact how you feel about the game. There's no doubt that there's the causal link between if I'm running a show and I'm not doing very well, how I'm going to feel about FPL and things like that. But it also actually works quite nicely to do a show because it's quite cathartic, really. Talk about the mistakes you've made, why
Mm.
you've made them. The way that we run things is always kind of quite like, we'll talk about why that happened, we'll delve into it, we'll go through it, warts and all. And that can be quite cathartic, can be quite a release
Mm.
to do that. It can get it off your mind. And sometimes that can really help.
A few, a few people have actually, I think Go on Goal, FPL, and a few other people have said that the content creation is actually almost like a therapy for them when they've had a bad
Oh,
game
absolutely.
week. What advice would you give to anyone who might be struggling with their mood or mental health because of FPL, Tom?
Stop playing FPL.
Stop playing FPL.
Simple as that. Stop playing FPL.
Okay.
If it's upsetting you, stop playing it. It's not the be all and end all. Doesn't matter. Your life is much more important than FPL. There's other things in your life which are much more important than FPL. If you've gotten to this point and FPL is much more important to you, find a new hobby. Frankly, if it is upsetting you, don't play it, because at the end of the day, as you kind of mentioned with, and we both kind of hinted at it with the methadone heroin thing, you're looking for big numbers. You're looking for that rush. You're a dopamine addict, effectively playing FPL a lot of the time. If your captain goes off, there's no better feeling than your differential scoring big points. Fabianski keeping a clean sheet, in game week 11. I think it was 9 points. Kaboom! That's amazing. My friend, my Nick, who I spoke about earlier on, getting 50 points off Cole Palmer when he captained him. That's incredible. But a lot of the time, there are a lot of lows of FPL, and if you can't handle them, they are genuinely making you upset. Like genuinely, absolutely making you upset, and that's having a material impact on your actual life. You need to take a step back and think and reevaluate what you're doing with this game. If this game is making you feel like that, stop playing it. Simple as that. Just log out, just delete your team, delete your socials, get on with your life elsewhere. Because that's the brass tacks of it. There's no in between for me. If it's making you feel that way, just don't play it anymore. There's no other way that I can phrase that rather than that.
Yeah, there's the last interview I did. I don't know if it will be out on the channel before or after this one. Was with a guy called Ray Cresci. I'm not sure if you know of him. He appears on Elite FPL and FPL Juice sometime, and basically the whole interview was about why he gave up FPL this season. And
Is he not playing it at all?
he's playing the Telegraph version, but
Right.
specifically FPL, it was affecting him quite a bit, and
Mm,
he does not regret it. He's much more enjoying his life balance since he gave up. Um,
absolutely.
so a bit of a conceptual question here,
Um,
Tom. Do you think there are any changes that FPL, and not just FPL here, but there are other games like what's the game? I can't remember. There's a game involving FPL that involves betting, but the name escapes my mind now. What do you think those fantasy football websites in general could do to help the mental health of their player base?
um, right. So that's a difficult one because
Mm-hmm.
uh, my overriding feeling uh, is very similar to what I expressed to you earlier on about gambling. That it is addictive, and I think that not a health warning. I don't think that's required. I think that's going a bit too far.
Mm.
But I think links to ways to deal with the negativity that can come with FPL, which Premier League will never do, but ways to deal with negativity of fantasy football would be very important. Um, I think also just maybe acknowledging that in their socials that
Mm.
because I think that like back in the day, the OFPL Twitter was very sort of like factual. And now I think at times it can be a little bit it can not intentionally troll, but it can. So it can say something like, blah blah is blank this week. How do you feel about that? Managers who captained it, and there's this kind of a sad photo, and that can really trigger people, right? It
Yeah,
can be quite
yeah.
triggering. So I think maybe them acknowledging that FPL can have an emotional impact would be very key. That would obviously have a bit of an impact with people who are not quite on board with that side of things.
Mm.
So people might think, oh, they've got woke or all that sort of empty
Yeah.
nonsense that comes out.
You're
But
probably.
hey, I
I
mean,
can imagine that. I can imagine. I don't know, Nigel Farage saying, "Avoid fantasy football." They've completely woked out or something like that.
ugh, vomit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely got to be a recognition that's what's important. I'm not saying they go full tilt. I'm not saying it's like gambling. I'm saying it's kind of is, but it still should be recognised as addictive, and there should be some acknowledgement of that within kind of their content sometimes of how they speak to people, and also perhaps something around that with children too. It is very fun, but gambling is also very fun, and that's how it's marketed. So there should be kind of checks and balances surrounding that. But I wouldn't be kind of advocating that to the same kind of severity as with the gambling.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Mate, do you- I've got to go to just check on my daughter because she's just woken up.
Yes, we will pause. Hello, and we're back. Tom, is just for the viewers worrying. Is your daughter okay?
Oh yeah, no, she just woke up. It does happen every now and again if you've got a child. But yeah, I think that kind of made me also think when I was running upstairs to
Mm.
just make sure just settle her down. But having kids as well definitely does put FPL in perspective. So it depends obviously when you came to it. So I know that like loads of people, Mark from Scout comes to mind, who obviously had kids before they started FPL, so it's a little bit different. But with all of that stuff, with all of the mental health side of it, it kind of it becomes so much easier with your kids, right? Because I'm pissed off because I've just lost my Arsenal clean sheet in the 91st minute, but then I look at her, just like wandering around playing with her Play-Doh. I think she doesn't know about this, and it's going to upset her. It's like she's not going to be upset because she's a bit too young to know. But my mood, because of something which has happened that I can't control, shouldn't impact her experience of what's going on
Mm.
today
Mm.
over the next few and over the next 20 minutes.
Mm.
So it's a really it's a real shortcut, a real eye opener for why you should just be like, right, okay, that's happened. I can't do anything about that. I couldn't have done anything about that. And there's no way I was selling player X and player Y this week. Let's get on with it because, like, you know, she doesn't care. And it was the same with my partner as well back in the day. But I mean, obviously, I love my daughter a bit more than my partner. So, it's one of those things that you kind of look at it. It helps to just make sure that you're not going to be bringing FPL into your actual life in some ways.
Yeah, I remember one. I haven't got any kids, but I remember one Christmas I spent far too long on my FPL team and got a bit pissed off when it didn't go well on Boxing Day, and really didn't. My girlfriend at the time and family who I was staying with were really not that impressed, and it's just not worth.
Oh no.
It's just not worth it, is it? Compared to, there's so many more important things in life. But having said that,
Yeah.
Tom, we usually finish by just having a brief chat about how the season is going and your tips for FPL. How is your season going, mate?
Well, I mean, it's never been. It never goes as well as you want it to, but I think this year has been quite difficult. And I think there was definitely a period where I stuck with Haaland rather than moving on to the Salah team. Obviously, at the start of the year, fantastic, and
No.
then you kind of got from I think it was a Newcastle game in game week 6, triple captained him against Southampton in game week 9. Finally, got rid of him
Was
in
that
game week.
was that the game he scored the hat trick, or the one that he didn't do anything?
The Southampton game was in game week 9, so
That's the
that
one
was
he didn't do
he
anything.
got
Yeah.
one goal in the 5th minute, and that
Mm.
was it. And he got his like kind of career best XG,
Yeah.
but only got one goal.
And he
So
got
that was frustrating.
and he got booked as well, didn't he? And didn't get any bonus points, if I remember.
I think no, that was later on
Okay. Okay.
because all of the City defenders basically got the bonus that week.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
yeah, it's been quite frustrating. I think kind of the busy Christmas periods hopefully made a few gains here and there, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be an awful lot going on later on within the season where hopefully I can make a benefit. But I mean, I'm really enjoying the season, honestly, Gary, despite it being a little bit of a mixed bag. Like I think the scope for difference because the pricing has been so good
Mm.
has just been fantastic, and it is in terms of the planning, in terms of the ability to kind of go off piste, as it were, and find ways to plow your own furrow and follow your own instincts. It's like so much more liberating compared to how it was before, when you had a small cohort of players that pretty much you had to own,
Mm.
and within the pricing structure, it kind of made sense to own them, and you were fine just doing that. Whereas these days, this year, especially as well with the transfers and the rolling, there are so many different ways to play FPL, be it ultra conservative, five transfers and all that sort of thing, and to being quite aggressive with it. So
It makes it
no,
much
I'm
more
really enjoying.
difficult for a template to form, or at least easily, doesn't
Oh,
it?
it's so good, honestly, it's so good. Even though I'm like not coming out on, um, I have not kind of completely been coming out on it on the good side of it, as it were, I'm still like massively enjoying it. I'm massively enjoying like week to week. There's no sort of captain which has died in the wool. There have been so many kind of occasions where one captain was really good, another captain was really good, and the effective ownership was kind of split. Whereas back in the day, it was obviously all Haaland, all Salah. So yeah, it's been a really good year, and I'm still really enjoying it.
There's
So
two things specifically I wanted to ask you. Do you, because I've thought about this the last couple of days since I did my last interview, do you feel like almost I've been playing just a season less than you? I almost feel like I'm to some extent relearning how to play this season because of the changes. You know, not like obviously a lot of it still applies, but the 5 transfer thing and the pricing, I almost feel like I'm relearning. Does that make sense?
yeah, it depends what sort of manager you are, Gary. So I'm not a patient person,
Okay.
and I'm never going to get to. If I get to free transfers, that's going to be a fucking miracle. So I'm not looking at it like it's going to be too different. And I think that, do you use FPL review by any chance?
That was going to be my next question. I am a massive because I heard you talk about it on your last podcast. I'm a massive fan of FPL Review, and I've generally only, I don't know if you use it, but I've generally only heard the managers I've had on so far talk about it negatively. So yes, I do.
It's a brilliant resource. But as I said on that pod a little while ago, um, early doors, first kind of 10 game weeks or so, it's drunk. It doesn't really know what it's doing. It comes up with all sorts of ridiculous suggestions, but after
Mm.
a while, it really comes into its own. I don't use it as closely, as fastidiously, as perhaps slavishly as quite a lot of other people that are out there in the community. But it's still a really vital resource for me as a consultative voice,
Yeah, I agree.
objective sort of way of looking at things. A really important sort of just checkpoint in my decision making process. And now onwards, it's just so good around sort of December, January sort of time. So I'm hopeful that trusting in it, not to a huge extent. So I'm not going to be the person who just suspends my own thoughts and just kind of trust review, but using it a little bit more. Hopefully now is going to kind of steer me in the right direction. But yeah,
Mm.
I mean
I'm a
it's
ma-
great.
I'm a massive fan of it. FPL Review. I know that you don't sponsor any podcasts, but if you want to, there is a space here. Um, but yeah, no. To give my best 2 ranks in 7 seasons of playing before 2 seasons ago, when I subscribed to FPL Review, were 90,000 and 30,000. And the last 2 years, I'm similar to you. I don't use the make what transfer should I make, but I use it as a reference for points. I've got my last 2 seasons. I've been 12,000 and 3,000, and
Ooh,
that's largely
hero.
because I don't use it to make my decisions, but I check my sanity and check whether or not what I'm doing sane, and will let it. I mean, I can't remember who said. I think it was Trigger Lips the other day. Did say when you use it, it's difficult to know where your thought process ends and FPL review takes over. If that makes sense, but
Yeah,
as long as I'm getting good ranks, I don't really give a shit, to be honest.
absolutely. It becomes a bit of a point of pride, I suppose, to not to use it. But that's the way the market's going, unfortunately, and more people are using it. There's a greater awareness of analytics and FPL. It's very similar to when I first started FPL. There was a lot of kind of distaste for podcasts, spoon feeding
Mm,
um,
mm,
information to the masses, right? Um, and this is the next stage of that, where it tells you what to do, and it tells you what to do with much more gravitas, credo, power than I ever could, because it crunches loads of numbers, looks at your team specifically, and tells you within your scenario, this is the best move for you to grab your EV. Like, that is insane.
and you see it in
It's
their
ins-
in numerical form, not just some guy suggesting it. It's like
yeah,
there in number, isn't it?
it's an insane resource, and you'd be like mad, or you'd be I don't know. It's we had Simon FPL Analytic, who's a good friend of mine in the FPL community, but we had him on during the preseason to talk about kind of the impact of review, the endless march of the review drones, and he kind of framed it in a way which really resonated with me. That using review is a huge act of humility because it basically is you acknowledging that I don't know everything.
Yeah.
I that my point of view is necessarily subjective because it is. That's kind of incontrovertible. That how you see FPL, be it through watching the football, be it through absorbing the data, that is like incontrovertibly subjective. Because if you watch the football through the eye test, two people can watch the same football game and come out with completely different views of what they saw that day. I mean, that's an incontrovertible truth. In the same way, two people can look at a load of data. So we can go on the Scout, go on Hub, go on FBref. We can look at data, and you and I will both. There's something called researcher bias. So we'll both come out with completely different points of view based on our kind of our priors or our kind of preconsiderations or
Well,
preconceptions
we
about
can
certain
look for
things.
specific things that we want to see, like shots on target, or you can read data in a way that's favourable to your pre-held opinion, can't you?
Yeah, that's it. And then you've got confirmation bias as well, where you both. So there's two sides of it. You find data which corroborates what you're trying to do, and you discard data which uh, would go against what you're looking to find. That's one people forget, but it's so true. So FO review is very good because it cuts through all of that, which you wouldn't necessarily think, but it does, and it's very useful.
Would you give
Do I use?
Would you give credence to anyone who says it's cheating, which I know a few people on this podcast have done?
How can I put this politely? Get over it. Um, I think it's a tool to be used in the same way that data is a tool to be used, in the same way that your eye test is a tool to be used, in the same way that listening to your favorite podcast is better at explaining tactical nuances as than you are to use. Whether if it becomes an I win button, if last year the winner was a FPL review aficionado.
Was it?
If that keeps if that keeps happening, then maybe FPL need to think about it a little bit.
I mean,
But what they've done this year,
as you did say, it has fucked up a bit at the start of the season. As someone who follows it quite closely, it's not been
yeah,
great, has it?
yeah, and but what FPL have done this year has definitely helped with that a little bit, with the rolling transfers to 5. What that's done is it's changed the baseline effectively because in the days when you had 2 free transfers and that was it, it was so easy for people to copycat. Um, you know, it wasn't that difficult to kind of follow the same. Everyone to be on a similar template, everyone to be on a similar number of transfers. I mean, obviously, you had loads of people who were just copying their favorite content creator.
I had sorry, Tom, to interrupt you again.
That's right.
I had Dan FPL mate on here a few weeks ago, saying I don't know if you remember when he was 12th in the world and 25%. 25 of the 100 teams in the top 100 were basically copies of his team, and he apparently got a lot of stick for that. Basically to hide his team and not confirm his transfers. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's fine. So, but I think this year that's not as likely, like because people are all in different. Unless you're properly copying content creator, loads of people are in completely different kind of scenarios because everyone's got different kind of numbers of free transfers they've got to use and all that sort of jazz. So I think that I think the diversity in FPL, be it when it comes down to different teams being picked, different captains being chosen, like all of these things really help just to make the game a lot more fun. And that's what we're here for, really, is fun. Obviously,
Yeah.
like acknowledging all of the negatives that we've already discussed.
So, last question I usually ask Tom is wearing that you said quite a few times that your rank is not the best. What tips would you give to someone to improve as an FPL player?
Well, I mean, my rank history is not the best, but I think that kind of helps inform what you don't do. Um, I think that it kind of, I suppose, also helps
True,
you
true, true, true,
within certain scenarios
true.
figure out what the best way of doing it is. I've got one thing which is very useful,
Okay.
especially over the last couple of years where I've kind of recovered. Um, Kiss, keep it simple, stupid. Um, my, because I don't know, if, is it too kind of, yeah. I do like to pride myself on being quite an intelligent person,
hmm
and a lot of the time, being too clever doesn't get you very far in FPL. Like
Can you
you
give an
see it every
Can you
week.
give an example, Tom?
I can. So I see it every week. People not captaining the right captain,
Mm.
the obvious captain, just because you think that you want to go against it for some reason. And there's so many behavioural science and psychological prejudices that build up in your head surrounding why you wouldn't do that. You use things like confirmation bias. You can, um, you know, rail against herd mentality. You can do all sorts of things to talk yourself in certain situations, especially if you do give FPL the same headspace as someone like I do. But the reality is, a lot of the time, keeping it simple, like someone like FPL General does, is the best way to be consistent. You can win FPL through making wild decisions week to week, but we've seen that through many, many years. That the winner of FPL the next year has gone to a 400k, 500k, 600k overall rank game week 38 because all they've done is just one year they've got ludicrously lucky.
Mm.
But to remain consistent in FPL, as I know Joe told you, the best thing to do, to paraphrase him, is just to keep it simple. Honestly, a lot of the time, because you can't go too far wrong. Herd mentality exists for a reason, right? It's evolutionary psychology. The idea that cave person you is driven by two particular instincts, impulses: greed and fear. So imagine that back to camp was bought, killed deer. Uh, why would you want to eat the deer? Two reasons. One, greed. You're hungry, and you want to eat while everyone else is eating. And also fear. If I don't eat, I could die. Like these things exist for a reason. They exist to keep us alive. And paraphrasing something, transplanting something which is quite sort of about the human condition into the silly world of FPL. But the reason why, like all content creators, which has become a pejorative term in recent years, do tend to corral around a certain player or a certain captain every week is because it's the simple thing to do. It's the obvious thing to do. Like the template is a template for a reason. Players who are being brought in often are being brought in for a reason, and being able to cut through that week to week is actually a bit of a skill because the narrative can be quite strong around certain players and sometimes it can be nonsense.
Mm.
But a lot of the time, just keeping it simple can be so important. And nowadays, as well, keeping it simple if you're planning as well can be so important. So, if there is an element, especially when you've got 5 free transfers, if there's an element where you're looking at a plan, and hey, here I am, being like, well, okay, if I go down to 1 free transfer here and then everything stays the same, and I can make a few sort of transfers around this sort of area. You're going too far into the minutiae. Like FPL is so changeable, like week to week. Just try to keep it as simple as possible. You're saying you're a big FPL review fan. That simplifies things a lot. I
It does.
wouldn't say to completely as you said, Trig said to you, I wouldn't say to completely give yourself up to the robot, but at the same time, just appreciate what it can do for you in terms of just cutting through all of the noise and helping you to come to your own decision. And yeah, keeping it simple is always so important, and that can be via your own the podcasts or shows that you favor, listen to those people using a resource or a tool like FPL Review, or your own understanding if you DYOR in terms of watching the games or the football. Like all of those things can really help you. So yeah, do your own research maybe, but ultimately just keep it simple because that's what's really important about FPL.
Great advice. I completely agree. Tom, it's been absolutely amazing having you on, mate. Thank you so much. Anything
Yeah.
you wanted to say before we finish?
No, thanks very much for having me on, Gary. It's been very enjoyable. I've had 3 beers. So yeah, what did we say earlier on?
Nice one.
Sharpener number 1,
I'm on my
loosener number 2, eye opener,
yeah.
and then number 4 after this when I'm sitting down, watching the Americans as the eye closer. So perfect evening. Thank you so much for your time.
Lovely, thanks, mate. Yeah, I'm on my third as well. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe to help me continue to hopefully get amazing guests on like Tom, and I will see you in the next one.